August 1st, 1943, 2 p.m., 2,000 feet above the burning refineries of Ploesti, Romania. The air inside the cockpit of the Blue Streak isn't just air anymore. It's a pressurized soup of lead, oil, and adrenaline. You are strapped into a vibrating metal chair, surrounded by thin aluminum skin that offers about as much protection as a soda can against the 20mm cannon shells exploding around you. First Lieutenant John Killer Kane is shouting over the intercom, but you can barely hear him over the deafening mechanical scream of 4 Pratt & Whitney R1830 engines. Look out the waist gunner's window. This isn't the war the history books usually show you. There are no clouds here. You are flying so low that you can see the laundry hanging on lines in Romanian villages. You are so low that the massive B-24, with its 110-foot wingspan, is tossing haystacks into the air like a hurricane. This is Operation Tidal Wave, one of the deadliest and most daring air raids in history. The target, Hitler's gas station. The Ploesti oil refineries provide 60% of the Reich's fuel. If they burn, the Wehrmacht stops moving. Suddenly, a black wall of smoke from a hit refinery rises directly in your path. Kane pulls the yoke back, the heavy bomber groaning as it clears a cooling tower by inches. Behind you, a plane named Old Baldy isn't so lucky. It takes a direct hit to the bomb bay. You don't see an explosion. You see a son being born. In an instant, 10 men and 30 tons of American engineering are vaporized. For the German and Romanian gunners on the ground, this is a sight from a nightmare. Their radar didn't pick you up because you were hugging the earth. But as they look up, they see something that defies logic. The sky is full of silver boxes. The B-24, with its high-mounted Davis wing and twin tail fins, looks like nothing else in the sky. It looks mass-produced. It looks industrial. The German planners in Berlin had told the High Command that America was a nation of jazz and refrigerators. They believed the U.S. could never build enough heavy bombers to sustain these kinds of losses. They calculated that if they killed enough pilots and destroyed enough airframes, the Americans would simply run out. But as Kane banks the Blue Streak away from the burning ruins of the Romana refinery, he knows the truth. He knows that back in Michigan, a single building is already replacing every plane lost in this raid before the sun even sets. This isn't just a battle, it's the beginning of a relentless industrial crushing of the Axis powers. May 16th, 1940, 1 p.m. The floor of the United States Congress, Washington, D.C. To understand the miracle of Willow Run, you have to understand just how pathetic the American military-industrial complex was in the spring of 1940, while Hitler's panzers are slicing through France and the Luftwaffe is darkening the skies over Europe. The United States is essentially a sleeping giant with no muscles. President Franklin D. Roosevelt stands before Congress. The atmosphere is electric with anxiety. He makes an announcement that sounds like pure science fiction to the people in the room. He calls for the production of 50,000 warplanes a year. The room gasps. Some laugh. At that moment, the entire U.S. Army Air Corps has fewer than 3,000 planes, many of them obsolete biplanes and trainers. The American aviation industry is a boutique business. Companies like Douglas and Consolidated are building planes by hand in sunny California hangars. They are craftsmen, not manufacturers. They measure their output in planes per month, not per hour. You have to imagine the scene. An aircraft factory in 1940 looks more like a high-end furniture shop. A group of men stands around a single fuselage filing down a piece of aluminum by hand because it's 1/16 of an inch too long. If you need a boat, you go to a bin and hope you find one that fits. This is craft production. It's beautiful, it's precise, and it is utterly useless for a global world war. The aviation experts in Washington tell Roosevelt his 50,000 plane goal is a fantasy. They argue that planes are too complex, too delicate for the crude methods of Detroit. They say you can't build a bomber like you build a Ford coupe. But Roosevelt knows something they don't. He knows that across the Atlantic the British are exhausted and the Germans are winning because they have a head start on industrialization. He turns to the only men in the world who understand the gospel of volume, the Titans of Detroit. June 20th, 1940, 3 p.m. The office of William S. Knudsen, Washington, D.C. Bill Knudsen, the former president of General Motors, has been recruited by FDR to lead the National Defense Advisory Commission. He picks up the phone and calls his old rivals at Ford. He doesn't ask for a favor. He issues a challenge. "We need the B-24, Knudsen says, and we need it in numbers that will make the Germans lose their minds." The B-24 Liberator was designed by Consolidated Aircraft in San Diego. It is a technological, marvel-fast, long-ranged, and capable of carrying a massive bomb load. But Consolidated is drowning. They have orders for thousands of planes and no way to build them. They are working in the mud, sometimes literally building planes outside under circus tents because they don't have enough floor space. When the Ford engineers arrive in San Diego to see how the Liberator is built, they are horrified. They see workers using hand drills and fitting parts with hammers. There is no standardization. A wing from one B-24 might not fit on the fuselage of the B-24 right next to it. "This isn't manufacturing," Sorensen mutters as he walks the San Diego floor. "This is tailoring." Sorensen realizes that if America stays with these methods, the war is already lost. He goes back to his hotel room that night. He doesn't sleep. He spends the night sketching a vision of a factory that would be over a mile long, a building so large it would create its own weather patterns. He isn't just planning to help Consolidated, he is planning to replace them. He is planning to show the world that when Detroit goes to war, the old rules of craftsmanship are dead. January 21st, 1941, 10 a.m., the Ford Administration Building, Dearborn, Michigan. The sketches Charles Sorensen brought back from his sleepless night in San Diego are now spread out on the massive oak table in Edsel Ford's office. To an outsider, they look like a child's drawing of a long, thin box. To an engineer, they represent a declaration of war against the status quo. "The aviation people told us we were dreaming, Edsel," Sorensen says, his voice gravelly from lack of sleep. "They said a bomber has too many variables. They say you can't move it on a line because the weight will warp the airframe. They say the tolerances on the Davis wing are so tight that only a master mechanic with 20 years of experience can set the rivets." Edsel Ford leans over the table. He is the quiet philosopher of the Ford empire, often overshadowed by his father's erratic genius, but he understands the future better than almost anyone. He knows that the B-24 Liberator is composed of roughly 30,000 major parts and 360,000 rivets. To the aviation industry, that's 360,000 opportunities for human error. To Edsel, that's 360,000 opportunities for automation. "If we can't move the plane to the workers," Edsel asks, "then how do we bring the volume to the plane?" Sorensen points to a section of the sketch. "We don't just move the plane. Ifraz, move the entire environment. We build massive steel jigs fixtures that weigh more than the plane itself to hold every piece of aluminum in a literal vise. We make it impossible for a part to be a millimeter out of place." At that moment, the door swings open. Henry Ford, the old patriarch, walks in. He is nearly 80 years old, a man of strange contradictions, a pacifist who hates war, but a patriot who hates losing even more. He looks at the drawings of the mile-long factory. He doesn't see a weapon. He sees a machine. "How much will this cost?" the elder Ford asks. $200 million just to start, Sorensen realizes. In 1941, that is an astronomical sum, roughly $4 billion today. And how many will we make? Sorensen doesn't blink. "One an hour, Henry. A bomber every 60 minutes. Henry Ford scoffs. At the time, Consolidated, the company that actually designed the plane, was lucky to finish one a week. The idea of producing a 4-engine heavy bomber in an hour was considered a physical impossibility by the War Department. It was like saying you could build a skyscraper in a weekend. But the Fords aren't thinking about airplanes as aircraft. They are thinking about them as units. To achieve this, they propose something that makes the San Diego engineers scream: interchangeability. In 1941, if a B-24 lost a left wing in combat, you couldn't just grab a wing from another B-24 and bolt it on. You had to custom fit it. Sorensen's proposal would change that. Every wing, every rudder, every nose cone produced at Willow Run would be identical to within a fraction of a human hair. The government is skeptical. The experts from the Air Corps fly to Dearborn to tell Sorensen he's crazy. They argue that the B-24 is a living machine that flexes and breathes. They tell him his hard tooling approach is too rigid. Sorensen looks the general in the eye and says, "Sir, you know how to fly them. I know how to make them. If you want 10 planes, stay in San Diego. If you want 10,000, get out of my way." The gamble is set. Ford puts his reputation and the company's entire future on the line. They aren't just building a factory. They are building a monument to the American belief that there is no problem that cannot be solved with enough concrete, enough steel, and enough sheer, stubborn will. March 28, 1941, 8 a.m., the Willow Run construction site, Ypsilanti, Michigan. You are standing in what feels like an endless ocean of gray sludge. The spring thaw has turned the Michigan farmland into a swamp. But there is no birdsong here, only the deafening roar of hundreds of bulldozers. Albert Kahn, the architect of Detroit, stands over blueprints spread across the hood of his car. He has been tasked with building the largest building under one roof in human history. This is not just a factory, it is an industrial leviathan in the shape of a massive L, covering over 3.5 million square feet. Why the L shape? Because Henry Ford, even in the midst of a global war, refused to pay taxes to the neighboring Washtenaw County. He ordered Kahn to literally turn the assembly line 90 degrees midway through the building just to keep the entire facility within the borders of Wayne County. Construction moves at a pace that terrifies the local residents. Concrete is poured 24 hours a day, even through blinding snowstorms. While steel girders are being erected at one end of the building, machinery is already being bolted to the floor at the other. Kahn and Sorensen work as a pair that the Axis would later call the architects of destruction. Kahn believed a factory wasn't just a box for machines, it was a high-precision instrument itself. Inside Willow Run, there are no windows. The lighting is artificial and never turns off, and the climate control system maintains a constant temperature so that the thermal expansion of massive amounts of aluminum doesn't throw off the tool settings. If the temperature inside dropped by just 10 degrees, a bomber's wing could grow by a fraction of an inch, making it impossible to drive 360,000 rivets with the required precision. But the primary challenge isn't the walls, it's the aircraft. The B-24 Liberator is a temperamental masterpiece. Its Davis wing has an incredibly complex shape for high speed and range, requiring tolerances down to the thousandths of an inch. When Ford's engineers first saw the blueprints from Consolidated, they were horrified. "These aren't blueprints," they shouted. "These are sketches." In the aviation industry then, it was common to file down parts by hand. "We don't work that way," Sorensen snapped. He ordered 3 brand-new B-24s to be torn down to the last bolt and every single part measured. Ford introduced hard tooling, massive steel jigs weighing tens of tons. If a part didn't fit perfectly, it wasn't filed down. It was scrapped, and the machine was recalibrated. By early 1942, the skeleton was ready. Around the plant, Willow Village sprang up an instant city of 15,000 people. Newspapers called the plant Willow Run because for the first few months almost nothing came off the line. But Sorensen knew once this flywheel started spinning, it would be unstoppable. May 12, 1942, 2 p.m. Inside the main assembly hall, Willow Run, Michigan. To the uninitiated, the interior of Willow Run looks like a geometric nightmare. It is a forest of steel. "These are the hard tools," Sorensen insisted on massive, multi-ton steel jigs that lock the B-24's components into place with the rigidity of a bank vault. You are looking at the flying boxcar in its skeletal form. The B-24 Liberator is a paradox. On one hand, it is incredibly advanced. Its high aspect ratio Davis wing allows it to fly faster and further than its more famous cousin, the B-17 Flying Fortress. On the other hand, it is notoriously difficult to handle. Pilots call it the Beast. It has no power steering. Flying it is a physical workout that leaves pilots drenched in sweat after an 8-hour mission. But for Ford's engineers, the challenge isn't the aerodynamics, it's the 360,000 rivets. In San Diego, workers were drilling holes by hand, often resulting in slightly misaligned skins. At Willow Run, Sorensen introduces massive gang drills. Instead of a worker drilling one hole at a time, a machine head descends and punches 100 perfectly aligned holes in seconds. The secret, Sorensen tells a group of skeptical army officers, is that we don't treat this like a plane. We treat it like a collection of sub-assemblies. The factory is divided into zones. In one area, the nose sections are built, complete with the bombardier's glass and the nose turret. In another, the tail empennage is assembled. These aren't just shells, they are fully stuffed. By the time the nose section meets the center wing, it already has the oxygen lines, the wiring harnesses, and the flight instruments installed. This is where the Willow Run. Skeptics were almost proven right. In the summer of 1942, the plant is a mess. The transition from handcrafting to mass production is agonizing. The steel jigs expand and contract with the heat of the Michigan summer, causing parts to jam. The labor force is green, and the blueprints are constantly being changed by the Air Corps. But Edsel Ford stays on the floor. He isn't in his office. He's walking the mile-long line, talking to the tool and die makers. He knows that if they can just get the first 10 planes right, the next 10,000 will follow like clockwork. They are perfecting the master gauges, the holy grails of the factory. These are the templates that ensure a wing made in January will fit a fuselage made in June. By the end of 1942, the stuttering stops. The machines begin to hum in unison. The first Ford-built B-24, nicknamed the Spirit of Willow Run, rolls out. It isn't just a plane, it's proof of concept. The beast has been tamed by the assembly line. June 14, 1943, 6 a.m. The main gate, Willow Run, Michigan. The sun is just beginning to peek over the Michigan horizon. But at Willow Run, the day never ended. You are standing at the main gate as 42,000 people converge on a single building. It is the greatest migration of labor in American history. They come in beat-up Fords, on bicycles, and in packed buses from Detroit. This is the human gearbox that keeps the machine turning. Because the young men are off fighting in the Pacific and Europe, the factory floor is filled with people who, 2 years ago, had never seen the inside of a machine shop. Meet Rosie. She's not just a poster. She's a 19-year-old girl from a farm in Kentucky who moved north because the factory offered $5 a day of fortune during the tail end of the Depression. She spends 8 hours a day inside the cramped tail section of a B-24, her ears ringing from the constant rat-tat-tat of the pneumatic rivet gun. Beside her is an African-American man who migrated from Mississippi, finally finding a well-paying industrial job that was previously closed to him. The conditions are brutal. The factory floor is a mile long, and workers often use bicycles just to get from one station to another. The noise is a physical, Weta 100 decibel symphony of metal striking metal. Because of the housing shortage, thousands live in Willow Village, a city of trailers and victory hooches, where the mud is knee-deep and the walls are paper-thin. You don't think about the war in the abstract, one worker recalls. You think about the wing flap. You think about the hydraulic line. You think about making sure your 63 minutes are perfect, because if you slip up, the line stops. And if the line stops, Sorensen finds you. There is tension too. Strike threats, racial friction, and the sheer exhaustion of 7-day work weeks simmer under the surface. But every time a finished B-24 rolls out the hangar doors at the end of the line, the fatigue vanishes for a moment. They see the product of their sweat taking flight. They aren't just workers anymore. They are the front line of the American economy, proving to the world that a free people can outproduce a slave empire through sheer industrial coordination. The human gearbox is now fully lubricated. The Willow Run jokes have died a quiet death. The factory has found its soul, and that soul beats exactly once every hour. April 15th, 1944, 11 a.m. The final assembly line, Willow Run, Michigan. The vibration is the first thing you notice. It isn't a sharp noise, but a low-frequency hum that vibrates in the soles of your boots and the marrow of your bones. It is the sound of 42,000 workers moving in a synchronized dance across 70 acres of floor space. You are standing at the mating station, the most critical point in the factory. High above on a massive overhead crane, a completed center wing section, weighing several tons and spanning 55 feet, descends with the grace of a falling leaf. Below it, the forward and aft fuselage sections are waiting on moving steel fixtures. "Steady now!" shouts a foreman over the roar of pneumatic rivet guns. "Drop it in!" The steel pins align with microscopic precision. The wing meets the body. In a matter of minutes, what looked like a collection of disjointed metal parts suddenly takes the unmistakable, aggressive shape of a B-24 Liberator. This is the Ford magic at its peak. Every part is identical. There is no filing, no shimming, no custom fitting. As the crane releases the wing, the entire line, nearly a mile long, shifts forward. It moves at exactly 5 feet per hour. To a casual observer, it looks slow, almost agonizing, but this is an illusion of scale. Behind this aircraft is another, and another, and another, stretching back into the dim artificial light of the factory's far end like a silver river of aluminum. A bell rings. It has been exactly 63 minutes since the last bomber rolled out of the hangar doors. On the line, you see the human gearbox in high gear. A woman from Kentucky who had never seen an airplane before 1942 now drives rivets into a fuel cell with the speed of a professional, an elderly man who came out of retirement to man a lathe. They are working 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At the end of the line, the L-turn Henry Ford insisted on creates a dramatic moment. The planes, nearly finished, are rotated 90 degrees on massive turntables to head toward the final checkout. Once they reach the end, the massive hangar doors, each weighing 20 tons, slide open. A pilot from the ferry command climbs into the cockpit. The engines, built by Buick and Chevrolet under license, scream to life, coughing blue smoke into the Michigan air. The plane taxis onto the runway, which is so large it has its own control tower. Within minutes, the bomber is airborne, heading east. It won't stop until it reaches a base in England, Italy, or the Pacific. The skeptics who called it Willow Run are silent now. The factory is currently outproducing the entire aviation industry of Nazi Germany combined. At Willow Run, time isn't measured in days or weeks. It is measured in minutes, and every 63 minutes, another nail is driven into the coffin of the Axis powers. October 12, 1944, 3 p.m. The Reich Air Ministry, RLM, Berlin, Germany. Inside the Luftwaffe headquarters in Berlin, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and a growing sense of dread. A group of German intelligence officers stands around a long table covered in high-altitude reconnaissance photos. The images, captured by daring Arado jets over England, show not just airfields but massive herds of silver bombers parked wingtip to wingtip. "This is impossible," an analyst whispers, peering through a magnifying glass at the tail markings. "Our data suggested they should have run out of airframes last month. We shot down hundreds over the Ruhr." For years, German intelligence had dismissed the Ford plan as American propaganda, a bluff meant to intimidate them. German engineers, who viewed aircraft production as a form of high-art craftsmanship, couldn't wrap their minds around the concept of a factory that treated a heavy bomber like a commodity. To them, a Messerschmitt was a precision instrument requiring thousands of hours of hand-fitting. To Ford, a B-24 was just a series of components to be stamped out by the thousands. The math of the war has suddenly become crystal clear, and for the Axis it is terrifying. While German factories are forced into forests and salt mines to escape constant bombing, struggling to produce planes by the hundreds, Willow Run is producing them by the thousands. At its peak, this single building was outputting more heavy bombers than the entire aviation industry of Germany combined. On the other side of the globe, the Japanese High Command faces the same grim reality. In the Pacific, the B-24's massive range made possible by the Ford-produced Davis wing is literally shrinking the ocean. They are finding Japanese convoys in waters previously thought to be safe. The report to Tokyo is bleak. The Americans aren't just out fighting them, they are out manufacturing them. This is the moment the Axis realizes they aren't just losing to pilots, they are losing to logistics. You can shoot down 10 planes, or even 100. But how do you fight a moving assembly line that never sleeps? How do you defeat a power that has turned war into a standardized industrial process? For the Axis planners, Willow Run has become their living nightmare, a silver river of aluminum that is systematically burying the Third Reich. January 20th, 1945, 9 a.m., a forward operating base in the Pacific. While a factory in Michigan hums, the Ford-built B-24s are changing the map of the world. Because Ford standardized the parts, the B-24 has become the ultimate global weapon. A B-24 that rolled off the line in April is now being repaired on a dirt strip in China using parts flown in from a warehouse in India. In the Atlantic, the B-24 Liberator does what the B-17 couldn't. It closes the mid-Atlantic gap. By flying 2,000-mile patrols, these bombers hunt down U-boats in the very center of the ocean, where German subs used to be safe. Because Willow Run is producing so many, the Allies can afford to station them everywhere, from the frozen runways of Iceland to the jungles of Burma. But the B-24 is more than just a bomber. It's a transport, a tanker, and a reconnaissance platform. It carries the H-2X radar, allowing the Allies to bomb through clouds, a technology the Germans can't replicate at scale. The sheer number of aircraft allows the Allies to maintain a 1,000 bomber raid frequency that breaks the back of German industry. Every hour, another Ford-built B-24 joins this global network. Each one is a 30-ton messenger of American industrial policy. The pilots who fly them, many of whom are barely 20 years old, know that even if their plane is riddled with holes, there is another one exactly like it, waiting for them at the depot. This industrial confidence changes the psychology of the Allied aircrews. They aren't just brave, they are backed by a machine that cannot be exhausted. August 15th, 1945, 7 p.m. The Willow Run tarmac, Ypsilanti, Michigan. The factory whistle blows, but this time the sound is different. It isn't the signal for a shift change or a fire drill. It is the long, triumphant blast of victory. As the news of the Japanese surrender filters through the mile-long plant, the pneumatic drills go silent for the first time in over 3 years. Workers, men and women who have lived in the 63-minute heartbeat of the assembly line, step out into the Michigan twilight. The final statistics are staggering. Since the first parts were stamped in 1941, Willow Run has produced 8,685 B-24 Liberators. That is nearly half of all Liberators ever built, produced in a single building. At its absolute peak, the factory was rolling out a completed heavy bomber every 63 minutes. If you had stood at the end of that runway in 1944, you would have seen a new 4-engine weapon take flight every hour, day and night, for months on end. The B-24 earned its place in history not by being the most elegant plane, but by being the most numerous. It was the workhorse that crushed Axis supply lines, the flying box that closed the mid-Atlantic gap, and the platform that dropped more tons of bombs than any other American aircraft in the war. It was the physical manifestation of American industrial might. But the legacy of Willow Run didn't end with the peace treaty. The factory had changed the world's DNA. It proved that the assembly line could master even the most complex technology. It bridged the gap between the era of the craftsman and the era of the aerospace giant. Many of the men and women who learned to rivet at Willow Run went on to build the jet engines of the 1950s and the Saturn rockets of the 1960s. The Willow Run Titan also changed the American social landscape. It was a catalyst for the civil rights movement and the rise of the middle class, as thousands of workers stayed in Michigan to build the cars of the post-war boom. Today, much of the sprawling concrete remains of Willow Run have been repurposed or demolished, but a section remains as the Yankee Air Museum. It stands as a monument to a time when a car company and a city of farmers and shopkeepers saved the world. It reminds us of a moment in history when the Axis powers looked at the American Midwest and realized they weren't just fighting a military, they were fighting a machine that could outproduce their wildest nightmares. The war wasn't just won on the beaches of Normandy or the islands of the Pacific. It was won in the mud of Ypsilanti, one rivet and one 63-minute heartbeat at a time.